Welcome to episode 65 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. In this episode's main segment, I'm interviewing Thomas McCarthy. Thomas recently co-wrote and directed The Cobbler, starring Adam Sandler. He got his start as a writer-director a decade ago with The Station Agent, which was a big indie hit. We talk briefly about The Cobbler and The Station Agent in the interview, so stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread the word about the podcast, so they are very much appreciated. A couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mentioned in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcasts, and then just look for episode number 65. Also, if you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide, how to write a professional logline and query letter, how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. It really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. Also, a quick plug for the new SYS Screenwriting Analysis service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional script evaluation on your screenplay. All the readers have experience reading for studios, production companies, or contests. The readers I've partnered with are the gatekeepers. They're exactly the same sorts of people who are going to be reading your scripts at the companies that you submit to. The readers will evaluate your script on several key factors like concept and premise, structure, character, dialogue, and marketability. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend. And I'm also offering a bonus. If you get a recommend from 2 readers, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service that I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking to make movies. Also, you can read a quick bio on each reader, and you can pick the reader who you would like to read your screenplay. So just check out the website for those short bios. The website URL is sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants if you'd like to learn more. A quick few words about what I'm working on. I just signed an option agreement last week. It was for a comedy script I wrote about the time I started this podcast back in August of 2013. I did a blast for a horror comedy screenplay last June, and this producer wrote back that he was looking for something that was just straight up comedy. So I pitched him this script, and he liked the pitch and requested the screenplay. Then I never heard anything from him. Again, this was last June, so about 9 months ago. Then about 2 weeks ago, he emailed me again and asked for the script again. I guess he never read it or never even knew that I had sent it to him. So I sent him the script again, and he replied a few days later that he liked it and would like to option it. I get a lot of questions about option agreements, so I thought it might be helpful for listeners if I basically just laid out exactly what was in this option agreement. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't like to answer specific questions people have about their own option agreements, but I really don't mind sharing what's in mine, and maybe that can help a few people. This is a free option. It's for 6 months. Then after 6 months, he has to pay me $500 for another 6 months. I get 3% of the production budget, and I think it stipulates that I get paid no later than the first day of principal photography. That's pretty standard. Almost every option agreement that I've signed over the years is between 2 and 3%. Usually I can get closer to that 3%, especially if I'm giving a free option to someone. They'll usually be a little more inclined to give me the upper end of that 2 to 3%. So in this case, as I said, I got 3%. There is a minimum of $20,000 and a maximum of $100,000. The minimum is in there, so he basically can't buy the script for $300 and tell me that he's shooting this movie on a budget of $10,000. 3% of $10,000 would be $300. I did have a producer try and do that to me once. So you do want to put some sort of a minimum in any kind of a contract, and I generally can get you just ask the producer what's the minimum amount that they will produce this movie for, and they'll tell you some sort of a budget, and you can just basically take whatever the percentage is, 3%, and fill in that, do the math on that and fill in that number as your minimum. It's highly unlikely. Producers usually want a ceiling. It's highly unlikely that this film would ever get a budget of anything close to $3 million. So having the $100,000 ceiling in there really isn't a problem for either one of us, because it's never going to come to that. My guess is he'll be trying to shoot this on a budget of around $500,000 to $600,000. So that'll mean, I make about $15,000 to $20,000. I guess I have the minimum of $20,000. So my guess is the budget will come in right around there, that $700,000 range. And 3% of that will be roughly the $20,000, which is the floor. My writing credit is also guaranteed. I will get a screenplay by credit. I'm not in the WGA, so there's no possible arbitration, which means no matter how many writers are on the project and how much they change it, I'll still get credit. I can, of course, share credit with other writers, I suppose, but he can't not give me a writing credit. This is obviously very important. In fact, probably the most important part of this contract is just stipulating that I am guaranteed of getting a writing credit. Since I'm not going to make a ton of money off this, as I said, the most likely I'll be lucky to get that $20,000. So that's the most I'm going to make. So really the credit is very, very important. Just getting another produced credit. If the movie does well, then I've really got something that I can use to, continue to push my career forward. I also get 5% of the producer's net profits, which basically means nothing. It's nice to throw in there just on the off chance that this thing really blows up. I could possibly, be in line for some money, but for the most part, I know that the producer's net, it really means nothing. That's basically it. The price and the length of the option, the amount of money I'll receive should he exercise the option, and my writing credit. I've mentioned this before on the show with all the options that I've gotten. I've never really feel like any of these options are really going to go anywhere, which is usually the case. I talk with a lot of writers who option stuff, and they feel like they've made it once they get, one or two options. And really, you've just got to get a bunch of these options. Kind of, they're just, they're irons in the fire, which is great. But any one of them is not really worth that much. It's really the getting multiple options like this going. So nothing changes about what else I'm doing as a screenwriter. This past week, I did a blast for a sci-fi thriller script that I wrote nearly a year ago. I did a blast last summer when I finished it, so this was the second blast for that script, and I'm still working on new material. I'm working on a mob action thriller screenplay. I'm about halfway done with that. I'm pitching it as Goodfellas meets Misery. It's a very contained script, small cast, and nearly the entire second and third act takes place in one location, which is just a middle-class suburban house with really just two actors. So it could be shot on a really limited budget. Again, I've talked about that a lot on the podcast about, writing something that has a good chance of getting shot. So that's what I'm doing with this script as well. Also, I'm going to be attending the Robert McKee Story Seminar on March 20th in Los Angeles. It's pretty famous, and lots of, writers have attended it. In the Charlie Kaufman movie adaptation, the Nicolas Cage character actually goes to this seminar, and Kaufman sort of makes fun of it. I've always wanted to go and check it out, so I'm finally getting to go this, as I said, March 20th. The weekend of March 20th. It's kind of pricey, but then again, it is 3 solid days, so I guess it might be worth it. I'll report back after March 20th, and I'll kind of give the listeners of the podcast some idea if I thought that it was worth the money or not. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm talking with writer-director Thomas McCarthy. Here is the interview. Welcome, Thomas, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Austin. Good to be here.
So to start out, let's just get right into it. You recently wrote and directed a movie called The Cobbler starring Adam Sandler. Maybe to start, you can give us a quick sort of pitch of the movie, maybe the log line.
That could be tricky. Basically, at its heart, it is the story of a New York City cobbler, shoe repairman, who is sort of stuck in the day-to-day of his life. He discovers and uses a family heirloom, which is a shoe stitcher passed down through the generations, and discovers that when he uses it to resole shoes, that he can actually take on the identity of that person. And it leads to a little self-discovery, so to speak.
Perfect. And I will link to the trailer in the show notes so people can check that out too. So where did this idea come from? Where was sort of the seed of this?
Like all ideas, are probably a little bit multifaceted in terms of its origin, but it started, I think, specifically with this idea of the old saying to walk a mile in another man's shoes. And I was sort of thinking about that one day, and at the time I actually lived above a Cobbler in New York City, and he had one of these neon signs in his store that said something to the effect of new souls every 15 minutes, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And I started putting it together, and I reached out to my co-writer, Paul Sandler, and we just started kicking around the idea for about a year until it started to feel like something. We kind of doing a little bit of research into New York and the Lower East Side, and kind of took on the stable quality of the story. It sort of just over time came together.
Okay, great. So you've got a bunch of films under your belt, and so maybe your experience getting this movie made is going to be a little different than some of the listeners, but maybe you can walk us through the process. You know, at this stage of your career, you know, what happens? I mean, was this a spec script, and then you take it out to your contacts? Did you pitch it to people, and then you got funding, and then were paid to write it? Maybe you can just kind of walk us through sort of the logistics of how a movie like this, you know, gets made.
Right. Well, since I do direct my own material and I have made a few films now, I just sort of jump in usually. And with this one, I'll finish the script. I'll get it to a point where I think it's right to start pushing it forward towards production and casting specifically, and I'll reach out to actors. It's almost always how I do it. So I'll start to put the script, some actors together. I have a lot of my team in place that I made these other movies with, and then you just try to find the money. It's going at financiers and studios and saying, "Here's what we got. Are you interested?" So it's always been a pretty simple process that way for me.
Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously getting a big star like Adam Sandler makes getting the financing easier. In this particular case, did you get him attached before actually securing financing, or did you secure financing and then get him?
I think it was around the same time. I honestly don't remember the order. We had some people that were interested in it. They certainly were interested. I had let them know we were going to go out to Adam. Obviously, everyone likes that idea. And about that time, I reached out to Adam through a mutual friend, Judd Apatow, and Judd put us in touch. And Adam and I had a conversation. I sent him the script, and not long after that, we were kind of getting to work.
Okay. And so there was no prior relationship with Adam Sandler before this?
No, I actually didn't know Adam at all. I didn't know Adam at all. I knew him only through his movies, and had heard good things about him from people who had worked with him. The guy's got kind of a sterling reputation for being a really good guy, and he turned out to be true.
Okay, great. So let's talk about the tone of this movie, because that was one thing that struck me, and it struck me many years ago when I saw the Paul Thomas Anderson movie with Adam Sandler. This is obviously not sort of the Adam Sandler brand of movie that we're used to seeing him in. And was there any pressure to maybe make it more broad, more of a broad comedy?
No, not really. I think, look, we were always playing with both genre and tone in this movie, which I think shifts a bit time to time, depending where we are in the story. But I think the script is pretty specific. I think Paul Sato, who I wrote the script with, and I talked a lot about it. We had a pretty tight script by the time we went to Adam. He got it. He, of course, had questions, but I think we all understood. We were all kind of on the same page to exactly what movie we were making. I think Adam felt like it wasn't really one of his movies, and it wasn't really one of my movies completely. It was somewhere in between. Like we were, taking the opportunity to try something new and different.
Yeah. And so the financing people, nothing like that. There's no pressure to turn this into something that might seem more commercial and more broad.
Well, I think the term commercial is often misused. I think, but I do think, of course, I think any financier is always looking for something like that. But no, we were pretty clear, and I think the script, like I said, set the right tone. I think you can read a script and get a sense of it or not. So I was always pretty clear with the movie I was making, and I don't think I remember any pressure to blow it up. I should say that early on we were partnering with somebody else, and I won't mention who it was, and they really loved the script. And then until their sort of head of development person basically was like, we've got to make this a much bigger, broader movie and really go for it at night. And some of the references he was using were just way off, and I just walked away. I was like, no, that's not the movie that we're making here, and it never has been. And so I think we were clear. And certainly by the time we attached Adam and had our team moving forward, everybody knew what movie we were making. I think whenever you're putting a movie together, working with people who understand what you're doing is critical. Because it's too hard to make a good movie. And when you have partners who are on the same page, it can become just very detrimental to the process and the end result.
Yeah, yeah. So let's dig into the actual fundraising of this. You've sent it out to actors, and you're going about doing the actual fundraising. What does something like that look like? Like, who invests in a film like this? Did you go back to investors from previous films? Did you just, network? What does that actually look like for someone like yourself?
I think our money people were up in Toronto, the festival at the time, and put the word out on the script, and a number of people approached us at different prices, and we just went with the people who had the right number to make the movie, which was Voltage at the time. And it was pretty straightforward. There wasn't not much to that. I had a window where I could make the movie in the fall, so we had to move pretty quickly. Was maybe the one thing we had to do, because that was sort of July, August, and we wanted to shoot in the fall. Adam had a window and I had a window, so we went to it.
Now, when you say you get the script out there to other people, what exactly does that mean? You've sent it to your agent, you've sent it to producers you've worked with who know money people, they send it around. It's just networking through your network.
Yeah, exactly. And my agent's at Gersh also. Jay Cohen works in their financing department, and he's putting, up in Toronto, selling in movies and selling ideas. And pitched this idea. People know me and know kind of what they're getting, so it was really just finding the right package, and someone that could move quickly was key. And not everyone that I've worked with before could move quickly, because sometimes these things just take time. And we found a company who could, and we made it with them.
Perfect. So, okay, let's just briefly just jump back. The Station Agent is one of the films that I still hear people, it's kind of the quintessential successful independent film. And I wonder if you could just take us back to those early days when you're out trying to raise the money for that. I think there'll be a lot of people that listen to this podcast that can kind of relate to that experience of really grassroots and getting something done. Maybe you can just tell us how that movie got made. How did you raise the money for that, and where did that all come from?
Well, that was my first time, and probably like a lot of your listeners, I had no idea how to go about getting money, and it took a long time. It was 2 or 3 years of banging around with that script. I was doing other things. I was acting more at the time, so I think I was out in L.A. doing some stuff, but I was moving around a bit and just taking every opportunity to kind of shove the script in front of somebody and say, what do you think? And it was slow going, and we finally, through some odd sequence of events, it got in the hands of a first-time financier, a guy named Robert May, who stepped up and financed the movie at $500,000, and it was his first time at the circus or the rodeo, depending how you look at it. And Robert stepped in, and we made it with him. So it was total, very independent movie in that regard.
Yeah, sure. And then take us through the process. Okay, so you get that movie made, and, you always sort of the thing that you hear is, it's very political to get in Sundance. You need the right producer's rep. You need to know someone. Take us through that process of getting into Sundance. Did you get a good producer's rep? Did you just submit it blindly? How did you actually get in?
We pretty much submitted it blindly. I mean, John Sloss ended up repping the movie at Sundance, who's well known in the community, but not going in. We just sort of sent it in and heard back and got in. And, we were pretty blind to all that. So I think, there is a lot of talk about that. But look, the best remedy to all of that is just make a good movie. And I think with that movie we did, it worked.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us just as I said, the Station Agent is kind of looked at as one of those quintessentially successful independent films. I mean, you won a screenwriting award for it. It was a good, solid hit, box office wise. What did your career look like right after that festival, and for maybe the year after it? What things were happening, or what surprised you, and what didn't surprise you?
Well, I mean, it certainly changed my career, really. It did. It sort of pushed me off towards a writing, directing career and opened up a lot of opportunities. Not long after, I went over to Pixar to write with them and write Up. And Pete, the director, was particularly a fan of the movie. And so, you know, it completely altered the landscape of my career and opened up a host of opportunities, which, you know, 5 films later and a bunch of other opportunities. You know, I still write on the side for studios. It just kind of really, I think that movie changed my life for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. But I'm curious of, like, literally, what does that look like? You get back to LA. Is your agent able to just set up meetings? You start going out to all the meetings. People are saying, hey, would you work on this project? Would you work on that project? Just maybe give us a taste of what that kind of looked like.
Yeah, something not far off. I was living in New York. But yeah, I was getting a lot of calls. Suddenly, a lot of people like Pixar, for instance. It's one we certainly took them up on. But just like, would you come out and show your movie, or would you do this? And, you know, meeting people who wanted to meet me as a result. I had a lot of material sent to me. But really, I kind of remember at the time just thinking, I just got to go back to work now. That's kind of what it felt like to me. It felt like after you spend so much time promoting your movie and talking about your movie and going to the award season, which is all great and fun, you really just get to the point where you're like, I just want to go work. I want to go write or direct or act. So I did. But yeah, it does certainly opened up all those doors that you mentioned to some degree, depending how much you embrace it or not. Everyone loves to take a meeting, as they say.
Yeah. And how do you think your background as an actor has shaped your writing and your directing?
You know, I think it's the fact that I've been working with material for a really long time, right? And working with dialogue and working with scenes and paying attention to story and arc and from an actor's perspective certainly had an impact, right? And I think ultimately as a director, then working with actors, I feel very comfortable. But,
so maybe you can just tell us how people can see the Cobbler and what are the dates? How is it going to be released?
It's being released both in theaters and on video on demand, and it'll be released on March 14th. Is that right, Jackie? March 14th?
It's March 13th.
March 13th. We're opening and platforming out in cities and starting in 10 markets. And you go online, you'll find it, and go see the movie.
Perfect. Well, you've been very generous with your time. I really appreciate your talking with me today.
You got it. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Just a quick plug for my email and fax blast service. I'm running a special right now where you can purchase 1/3 of the blast, the producer's blast, for a little more than $50. The total list is around 6,000 contacts, so this first 1/3 is about 2,000 contacts. So it's still a pretty solid number of producers. I've done this just to lower the barrier of entry so that people can check out the blast service without having to invest a whole lot of money up front. Obviously, if it works well for you, you're welcome to buy the second 2/3 of the blast after that. The one thing that hasn't changed, I still require that you join SYS Select, which at the time of this recording is just $24.99 per month. The reason I require this as part of the process is that I'm going to personally look at your logline and query letter and help you make them as good as possible. This is really to everyone's benefit. I want to make sure that every query letter that goes out using my service is well written before I send it out. The people receiving these email and fax queries can unsubscribe to these lists, to these blasts. So sending out a bunch of half-baked query letters will just burn the list up, which hurts everyone who might want to use this service in the future, including myself. Also, by getting my feedback on your logline and query letter, it means your response rate is going to be much higher. I've been doing this for a while, and I've had a lot of success from cold query letters. So I think getting my feedback alone is valuable and well worth the price of admission. You're welcome to join SYS Select for just 1 month and then quit once your query letter is ready to go. I hope you don't, obviously, but that's totally fine. And once you have your query letter approved by me, you're free to buy the other blasts later, or even even if you're no longer a member of SYS Select. You don't have to rejoin down the road just to buy a blast. It really is, joining for the month really is just to get your query letter and logline into shape. Also, lots of people have joined SYS Select just to get my input on their logline or query letter. So you're more than welcome to join, even if you don't want to use my blast service. So if you're looking for some feedback on your logline and query letter, from an industry pro. This is a great, very inexpensive way of doing it. Again, you don't have to use my blast service to join SYS Select and get my feedback. Also, by joining SYS Select, you get access to the SYS Select forum. In the forum, I've reviewed hundreds of query letters and log lines, and you can see my notes and the revisions the writers made. So this is a great resource just to help you write your own log line and query letter. You also get access to all the online SYS Select classes that I've done over the last year and a half. There are more than a dozen classes covering all sorts of screenwriting topics, from writing your script to pitching your script to writing and producing short films. It's a great resource for any writer who wants to further their screenwriting education. I always get the question, how long will this sale be going on? And honestly, I don't know. If it seems to be working well, I'll probably keep it going for a while. But if it just ends up being a lot more work, I'll probably just revert back to the one price for buying the entire blast in one big purchase. Anyway, to check this out, just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/blast. Again, that's sellingyourscreenplay.com/blast. So to wrap things up, just wanted to touch on a few things that were said in today's interview. One thing you might have noticed, this interview, at least for me, it felt very rushed. And what's happened is I've gotten in with a publicist who is promoting these independent films, and they're passing me a lot of these interviews that you're hearing. Not all of them, but I would say maybe 30-40% of the interviews I've done over the last 6 months. I'm getting through this one publicist who is working with these filmmakers, and sometimes they come to me and they basically say, you only have 15 minutes with the filmmaker. And that was one of these cases. So you could tell I was definitely rushing through it. Sometimes I always ask for more than 15 minutes, and sometimes they give it to me and some days they don't. So I wish I had had more time today just to dig in a little bit more into the station agent, because that really is a great example of a very, very successful independent film. What was interesting, though, talking with him, was he's not really the most introspective person, and I'm not even sure he fully understands why he was successful. I do think his story about how he got his recent movie made, it's a nice counterbalance to some of the other stories I've had on the podcast. I've talked to a lot of filmmakers that struggled for years, decades, trying to get things done, and it doesn't really sound like he struggled that much. So it's just nice to hear that sometimes things do go smoothly and you can get your movie made without a lot of problems. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.